I've been watching a lot of Sex in the City. I don't know why now, all of a sudden, considering the show came out in 98, but I don't seem to be alone. I feel like a lot of people around my age who were too young to watch it when they were kids are now watching it now as adults, 20-somethings, 30-somethings. And it just feels like everybody at the same time, like, linked together and decided to watch this show. And I'm here to talk about it because I watched all 6 seasons and 2 movies. And them are annoying. And I hate to say that. Like, they're annoying, but I'm hooked. Hello? Can you have some privacy, please? You want to go in another room? Service yourself, Samantha? Sorry. Yes, I've watched all 6 seasons, 2 movies. I've watched a season and a half and 2 movies in the last 2 days because Russet is home from school because she has bronchitis. I didn't even know dogs could get bronchitis. So that's what I've been doing for the last 2 days. And now that it's fresh on my mind and the frustration is still raw, I figured I should talk to you about it. Because I obviously liked the show enough to watch 6 seasons and 2 movies, but I hated every character. Oh, it was such a frustrating viewing experience, but also kind of a comforting one. And in some weird ways, kind of wholesome. I have mixed feelings about it. It's like slightly younger Golden Girls, but set in the big city and with, nudity, but same vibe. You have the kind of innocent, ditzy one. You have the cynic. You have the slutty one. And you have Carrie. She's just annoying. I don't know which one she would be in the Golden Girls. I know Charlotte and Rose would be similar, but Rose is less conservative, weirdly enough. And she was from like Oklahoma. R.I.P. Betty White. Anyway, yeah, so that's what I'm talking about today. I keep saying that. I'm Kendall, by the way. I don't think I said that. Hi, it's Kendall here. New around here, welcome. Not new around here, what is up, home skillet biscuit. No makeup today because it's 7 a.m., which is very early for me. I don't wake up before maybe 10 on a good day. So we're getting fresh face. Ironic for today's episode, considering so much about Sex in the City is about style and glamour, even though a lot of the clothes was ugly. Even at the time, I think they were kind of ugly. But fashion, it waits for no one, and it's all about your taste. Good girl. My baby. But being that this video is probably not going to be monetized because there's a lot to talk about. The show is called Sex in the City. Not Sex in the City, apparently. I've been calling it that this entire time. I feel like we should probably push it over to an ad, yeah? Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. This is Ad Roll Kenny, and today's video is sponsored by Raycon. Raycon! Everyday earbuds. It's getting to that time. It's swiftly upon us. Back to school, baby. You a high school student, you a college student walking around on campus. You need some new earbuds, baby. Well, why don't you try out Raycons? Their best-selling everyday earbuds offer sound, quality, and performance better than ever before. This beautiful cobalt blue, everything, stylish, profilish. But more than that, function, quality, performance better than ever before. These are incredibly quick charging when you're on the go. Just 10 minutes gets you 90 minutes of playtime. Ergonomically designed to fit the widest range of ear hole-lissies. And optimized gel tips for a custom fit. I recently got another tragus piercing. My piercer was like, oh my God, you have such dainty traguses. Oh my gosh, she's so girly. And I'm like, purr. And these headphones are good for my dainty traguses. But it also has all the cool functions of audio brands that are much more expensive than Raycon. Multi-point connectivity, awareness mode, active noise cancellation, 3 customizable sound profiles. They're weatherproof, sweat resistant, and they're very, very cute. As you can see, the green, I have color hyperfixations, but I just bought a bag that's also this color. So I'm like, is this where I'm going? Is this where I'm about to be? Use them while you're working out, listening to audiobooks, walking across campus. I've actually been cooking a whole lot recently, and there's nothing more like relaxing, listening to something in my earbuds and just being in the zone while I pickle something. And if you ever wanted to check out Raycon, now is a great time, again, ripe and ready for back to school, where you can get 20 to 40% off site-wide if you visit my link down in the description box at buyraycon.com/Kenny. That's buyraycon.com/Kenny to get 20 to 40% off site-wide. Big thanks again to Raycon for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get on to the debauchery. For those of you that are too young to remember or have any like outlying opinions on Sex in the City, it was quite the cultural icon in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I was really young and was still able to pick up on it. So that only lets me know that it was probably massive. You got to remember, this is prior to streaming services. This is just everybody is watching HBO, which you had to pay for. And everybody is like, I'm watching The Sopranos and I'm watching Sex in the City. Those were the two genders. The Sopranos was the super serious murder mystery, not murder mystery, like crime drama about Italian mobsters. Sex in the City was in many ways progressively feminine as it was regressively feminine. It was definitely giving very, very third wave feminism, which has its strengths and definitely its weaknesses, a lot of weaknesses. But as like a show in general, like in its enjoyability factor, it's not that good. It really isn't. But it's addictive. It's a weirdly comforting show. And I guess in today's video, I kind of want to like talk about general story arcs, but also kind of work through what it is I even liked about Sex in the City. Because again, it's not particularly good. It's not. Every character is very annoying in a way that's maybe more visceral because I am a woman who has been in the dating landscape. But in a way, it's also comforting because it goes to show that weren't shit in 98 either. In a very similar way. They just didn't have dating apps. So if you're still looking for love out there, not my light turned off. But what I was saying was if you find you're struggling with love, rest assured they were struggling in 98 and then they made it sound like in the 80s you didn't have this problem and they made it sound like in the 50s you didn't have this problem. It's comforting to know that dating has always been terrible. It's always been bad and you're not alone and it's not particular to you. And maybe that's part of the appeal, I guess, of Sex in the City, especially in the early 2000s, where there wasn't this kind of hearing everybody else's issues with this same topic, and it was probably even more so isolating. So having this fun, kitschy rom-com to kind of commiserate was really appealing. So of course, because I was like 3, I wasn't watching Sex in the City growing up, but I did know what it was because it was talked about a lot. The most experience I had was my sister gaslighting me when I caught her watching it, but I didn't know what I was looking at. It was the scene where Samantha was taking pictures of her titties and her coochies for memorabilia's sake. Like I couldn't even comprehend really what I was looking at. And my sister was like, oh no, it's called Sex in the City, but sex isn't like this nasty stuff. It's like, you know, men, women. It was a bad lie, but she was 10, so. But as an adult prior to watching it, the gist of my interactions with Sex in the City has been like, it's sprung forth some really funny memes, okay? Samantha, it's not funny in context. What is kind of funny in context? But Samantha taking off her wig, Samantha saying that a dick looked like a gherkin. That's very funny. The wedding scene from the first movie. Odds are if something was funny, it was probably Samantha. She was the favorite for a reason. So now, all of a sudden, seemingly with no real agitating factor, I decided to delve into this show. Again, very frustrating, really annoying, but also weirdly comforting and iconic. Me? Okay. I'm very annoyed about this lighting situation, but we'll have B-roll. So for those of you under 25, Sex in the City was this show. It was a comedic romance rom-com. Why did I short circuit? It was a rom-com American TV show that was originally on HBO that aired between 1998 and 2004. And then they had 2 movies that came out after that. And there's also been a prequel and a reboot of sorts. I'm not going to talk about the prequel or the reboot. I don't care. Maybe I'll touch on those in a different video if I like gain the traction or desire to look into them, but odds are this is probably it. This is probably the Sex in the City video. But it mainly follows our main character, Carrie Bradshaw, played by Sarah Jessica Parker, and her friends as they navigate the dating landscape of the big city, the Big Apple, New York City. Hence, Sex and the City. There's a lot about New York in it. You know, how it's this metropolitan place, this cosmopolitan place where people are fashionable and skinny and have a lot of money, but also really like shoes. It's actually an adaptation of an actual column that was in the New York Observer called Sex and the City, that was written by freelance writer Candace Bushnell from the years of 1994 through 96. So essentially each episode is an adaptation in some way or another, narrated by the Carrie Bradshaw character, who is using the real life instances of their dating life to ask questions, to peer inward, whatnot within the column. And it becomes very popular, the real column, Sex and the City, hence why we have a show at all. It follows 3 women that are in their 30s, 1 woman that is in her 40s, who are navigating the world of relationships and sex. They all have different like ideals and motivations for why they go about it. A bit of an archetype, quite cliche, some of them. There's certain things that I let go because it's a comedy, that some things are a bit like overly simplistic, typically, but in the ways that maybe it was a bit more subversive at the time, is that it actually does delve into a lot of topics that aren't really readily talked about in mass media, especially at the time. Does it always handle it well? No. But does it talk about it? Yes. But considering the topics weren't widely considered prior to that, I'm not gonna knock it. You know, it touches on sexism, interracial relationships, casual sex, emotional unavailability, abortion, single motherhood, miscarriage, infidelity, therapy, kind of ageism, particularly about being unmarried into your 30s, but also trying to be in the workforce as a woman or as a mother, the way that ends up being an issue. Health, physical, mental, sexual, STDs, polyamory, kind of a little bit there. Queerness. It handles queerness in a very interesting way. A very like, oh, I forgot people used to do that. Well, it's still pretty prevalent, but less so now. It's kind of ornamental. It's things to spice up the day, or like characters to kind of hang around the side walls of the main story to just say, we got some of y'all in there. Gay icon. But again, that's pretty good for the 90s, especially the early 2000s, where queerness wasn't explicitly just a punchline. But again, as I've kind of alluded to, a lot of these topics weren't handled great. It's corny, cliche, sometimes downright offensive, especially as we get into the movies. The movies, just the second one especially, throw it away. Shouldn't even claim that. You should act like it don't exist. Like Ba Sing Se, there's no war in Ba Sing Se. There's no Sex in the City 2 in the universe of Sex in the City. But there is this inexplicable charm about it, especially around Samantha, who very annoying as well, but less so than the others, but still very, very, very annoying. Awful, truly. But anyway, the story follows, again, Carrie Bradshaw, who is our main character, but one of the most infuriating people on the show. She's main character and narrator. In each episode, we follow a general theme or question that she has posed in her column that kind of is the overarching theme of their respective problems as women dating in their 30s/40s in New York City. And especially in the early seasons, it was always explicitly about men, which makes sense as she's a heterosexual woman dating, but it felt like, man, can we ever talk about anything else? Because dating isn't just about men, right? Dating is about inward expression. It's about outward expression, sexuality, about figuring out what you want, figuring out what type of relationship you would like. And that doesn't explicitly have to do with decoding men, right? But, you know, this is the late 90s, early 2000s. That's a very like novel concept to like mass media. So it's very like, what do men want? But it's about men. And sometimes as it goes along, it gets a little better at like branching off into topics that, though are still tangentially related to men, are a bit more broad and introspective to people in general. And again, as I was kind of mentioning before, it in a way kind of comforting when you think about it, like, oh, people have always been struggling with dating. It's not just like a recent thing. You're like, oh, because of dating apps. People don't want to commit because of dating apps. Baby, people ain't wanted to commit because they don't want to commit. But it's kind of comforting to know that it's always been terrible. So if they could do it in the 90s, assuming they did, they could do it now. But Carrie herself is awful in a way that I don't know that the show is fully self-aware of. She's the main character, yeah. So especially during this time, there is this sort of expectation that the main character is the person that we're rooting for, right? But I find her very annoying in so many capacities. This interesting like self-righteousness while also being a really bad partner and a really bad friend. Just bad. She's not great at anything really. Like, I guess because a big component of this show is aesthetics, the fashionable nature of living in the big city. So I think she appeals to that aspect of it because she was quite the trendsetter. She was the fashionista. She, you know, bought designer, and again, capitalism, especially in the 90s. Oh my God. Oh my God. Shoes. She really likes shoes. But as a person, she's like pretty vapid and self-serving, whether it's her cheating on her boyfriend with her toxic ex, spending all the money that she needed for rent on ugly designer shoes. The least you could have did is got cute ones. And then bitching at her friend for not loaning her money to pay her rent after she spent all her money on shoes. And just generally has the air of a main character because she is one, but in a way that's very undeserving. I feel like honestly, we could follow, maybe not Charlotte, but like we could follow Miranda and, well, maybe not one of them, but the other two could be a better main character than Carrie. She's actually quite unremarkable. She's just very annoying and frustrating to watch, especially with her like main love interest. If anyway, she's supposed to be emblematic of going towards healthy, well, maybe not healthy, but aspirational relationships. She really shows that the years spent writing about relationships and sex didn't really teach her anything because she fell in love with a man who gave very many signs that he is not great.
Just tell me I'm the one.
That's not fair because internalized misogyny is like, you dumb bitch, you ain't see that he wasn't shit. But then also I'm like, well, maybe he shouldn't not be shit, or those two things can exist at the same time. I don't know, but it was frustrating to watch because I'm like, damn bitch, are you listening to him? He don't want you, he don't like you, girl, listen. Well, that's a quick run on for Carrie. Then we have Charlotte York is the quote unquote sweet, naive one. Again, I assume she's supposed to be our Rose if we're continuing our Golden Girls kind of analogy. She is not sweet. She's actually not nice. She's not kind. She's actually just annoyingly waspily conservative. She's, you know, a very classic white woman with a lot of money. She was like prom queen and very representative of like a 1950s ideal, marriage, children, aspirations, all of that. Despite her being known as the sweet one, she's actually incredibly judgmental and has this frustrating privileged naivete that's like, oh, so grating. I mean, I will say as the show goes along, she becomes a little bit more tolerable as she just lives more life and she's like hit by the unpredictability of life. It helps a little bit, but she definitely still is very much so in a way that's both annoying and charming. This is perhaps some of her charm, her just like unrelenting optimism in regards to love and relationships and perseverance of continuing to go after the same wrong guy. I digress. Then we have Miranda Hobbs. Now, Miranda is my second favorite. That's not really a compliment because, again, I think all of them are very annoying. But of them, she is probably closest in some ways to my personality. She's quite the like career-minded cynic. You know, she's very like caricature of feminism, especially of the time. She's definitely pragmatic and self-sufficient, but there are times where it leans away from those just relatively effective traits to just being downright unpleasantly jaded. Like, damn, bitch, everything's bad all the time. Everything. She's a lawyer. She don't have to do anything for money. She's definitely like the foil to Charlotte, who's very coddled by traditional values and traditional family and the simplicity of that. You know, she's, again, this almost childish optimist, whereas Miranda is like this type A lawyer who on paper should appeal to all of my Capricorn traits. Oh, I got a new piercing and it's supposed to be a Capricorn, but I think it's backwards or upside down, backwards and upside down. I don't know, but I got a new piercing because I need it more. But yes, she appeals to a lot of my sensibilities around like work and independence and logic, but she's really annoying as shit sometimes. Like, I'm gonna need you to chill the out. Take a edible. Like, take a bath. Like, girl, she's so high strung. But she ends up having a particular arc where she is the only single mother of the group at one point because she ends up getting pregnant later along the way. And we're kind of like unpacking the harsh realities of single motherhood, especially as a career woman, and how you're kind of looked down on as a woman in general, but especially as one with a child. She also briefly dates Blair Underwood in the later seasons. Lucky girl. And finally, Samantha Jones, who is probably most people's favorite, easily the favorite. She's the only one that has any real individuality or personality, albeit she is still annoying as shit, especially in the later seasons. They really lost the focus on Samantha. In that second movie, oy. But she's a high-powered PR agent who is confident, outspoken, unabashedly sexual. You know, she's the oldest of them all, and she basically lives life not aspiring to relationships, not aspiring to marriage. If anything, she's kind of like, I want to live my life and then I'll have sex because I want to have sex and then go about my day. In many ways, I could imagine she was very maligned. She would be a maligned type of personality. Like, oh my God, she's such a slut. But then also so enviable to the very like conservative and withdrawn population. She's also probably the most unapologetically liberated of them all. She's on some level of queerness, though we don't really see it much. She has a relationship with a woman, which I'll get into more. But again, the way this show handles any kind of broad topic, it handles it in a way that is efficient for the early 2000s. Probably better than other aspects, but hey, in many ways, the show was ahead of its time. I'm thinking of like Friends during this, well, a little before this, where lesbianism was a punchline in that first season. It's like, what do you mean, two women getting married? Ugh. And I'm like, whereas this one doesn't handle it like, ugh. It's like, slay queen girlfriend, and then says like a slur afterwards. So, you know, progress. It's like a little time capsule in a very like, you know, superficial comedic way where we were in the mass consciousness around feminism. Well, in this white feminism, white queerness, white relationships, white people. Which is interesting because my first experience with a show like this was actually Girlfriends, which unfortunately, after watching Sex and the City, I do realize that Girlfriends is in many ways a straight up knockoff of Sex and the City, which makes me sad, but I still prefer Girlfriends over Sex and the City. It's essentially the black version that was on UPN originally, and then maybe CW. I don't remember when CW moved over, but there are moments that are straight up a 1-to-1. You know, it's 4 friends, each have their own kind of overarching personality and archetype. You have the main character who's incredibly annoying and does nothing but talk about she has a wonderful life going for her, but all she does is talk about I bring this up to say Sex and the City obviously was some type of, you know, shift in this type of content, and the idea of making a Girlfriends which was aware of how stark white the Sex and the City landscape was is interesting in retrospect now, just thinking about that. But that was just a side tangent. I actually really love Girlfriends, and it never got a proper ending because of the writer's strike, if I remember correctly, of 2008. They should bring that back. Like, when I was a kid, I hated Tony. I still don't love her. Let me not even go into Girlfriends. Maybe that could be a different day. I was gonna go into my whole diatribe about how I used to hate Lynn, and now as I'm older, I like Lynn more. And I used to identify with Joan, but now as an adult, I'm like, that bitch is miserable. Like, I don't identify with Joan at all, girl. I understand, like, a hardworking woman, but by God, can you think of anything but goddamn, you are a high-powered lawyer who left law to open your own restaurant, and all we hear about is how you don't have a man. Like, okay, we get it. Shit. Anyway, so back to Sex and the City, though. As you can imagine, because there is so much focus on relationships, a lot of the timeline and pivotal character changes take place through their relevant relationships. So I want to talk a bit about each of their relationships. So let's start with Carrie's. John James Preston, also known as Mr. Big, more popularly known as Mr. Big, is her most prevalent and overarching relationship throughout the show. He pops in and out. He's the first major love interest person. He's like her toxic ex that she goes back to periodically. And at least according to the show, he's like a classic suave debonair guy. He smokes cigars. He listens to Sinatra. He's hard to read, non-committal, with a wandering eye, emotionally inconsistent, emotionally distant, refuses to commit to Carrie, then marries another woman, then cheats with Carrie on that other woman that he did not like that much, but he married because he is this kind of like looming wandering figure over Carrie as she dates other people, has, you know, healthy relationships with other people. He's just always there. And for some reason, I guess the show wants me to think yay. Because, spoiler, they do ultimately end up together. And I don't know why that's supposed to be a good thing. He's awful. Like, he was never great at any point. Like, there was a period where he's the hard to read love interest, then he's the less than great boyfriend, then he's the affair partner, then he becomes this quote unquote friend that she has phone sex with whenever she's not dating somebody because he moves to California to open a vineyard. And then he goes running after her saying, I want to be with you, kid. He calls her kid, like, again, like he's Sinatra. Here's to you, kid. And they kiss and they're together at the end of season 6. And that's supposed to be like great, even though he had no actual growth or exploration or anything like that. Just great. Yeah, we got him. We were able to browbeat a man into submission that did not want you, Carrie. Great lessons from the love guru. Odds are, if you're familiar at all with Sex and the City, you're aware of Mr. Big. Again, he's the in-game guy that Carrie is trying to get over or trying to be with or trying to make sense of in her life. And again, the show is like, oh, he's so charming, but I'm like, bitch, where? He's not particularly interesting. He's just tall and smokes cigars and has a lot of money, which to some people is enough. And listen to Sinatra. I would just say, as a person who has been dating a while, not as much honestly as other people that theoretically should know more than me, but I started dating as an adult, and I think that's an advantage. I honestly would not recommend people dating before 21. Sorry. I don't recommend dating before you're 20. There's so much self-exploration. Honestly, probably not even until after college, because there's so much self-exploration you need to do. I know a lot of people are in a rush. Like, people go to college to get married and shit. And I'm like, have you considered like self-development during this time? You just left your parents' house. You got these 4 years where you're like in preschool adulthood. Maybe don't focus on another person. That's just me. Anyway, while I was dating, I'm going off topic again. While I was like dating around and like talking to people and stuff, at some point it should become unattractive that a person is hot and cold with you. Do you want to date a person that's hot and cold with you? No. Like, this shit is annoying. Do you want me or not? Do you want to be with a person that don't want you? Why are we doing this? You could have anybody else. Why do you want somebody that don't want you? I'm gonna need you to talk to your therapist about it. Why you only want that don't want you? And the ones that want you, even if they're like, oh, they're great, but I just don't want them. Why do you always not want them? Maybe you're just not into them. Maybe there's no chemistry. But I think it's important to ask yourself, why do you only want that don't want you? Are you avoidant? Didn't mean to call you out, but Aiden. So Aiden is the second guy that is like her big boyfriend, right? There's Mr. Big, and there's Aiden. Aiden is fine. He's better than Mr. Big. He's a lot more like of a nice guy. Just chill, not particularly interesting. I do think that, I was gonna say Carrie brings out the worst in him. Well, she cheats on him. She cheats on him with Mr. Big, and then they break up and come back together, and he can never fully trust her again after that. And instead of just saying, I can't trust you, I don't want to be in this relationship, he basically is like, we should get married so that everyone knows that you're mine, which is not a way to deal with trust issues. It's like, let me just claim you. Let me piss on your leg real quick. And that's not why you get married. You get married because you want to be married. Oh my God. Anyway, they end up breaking up. At least in the show, he doesn't have any like remarkable comeback outside of her running into him one day holding a baby. He had gotten married, had one kid, cute little chubby dude. I want to get one of those for Russet, the carrier things. That would be dope. Have her on my back while I'm cooking. Fire. But yeah, he's not great either. I think comparatively he's better, especially because when we get into like the movies, he does pop up in one of the movies. But yeah, if she's with Big, she's thinking of Aiden. If she's with Aiden, she's thinking of the big. And it's like, Carrie's so annoying. Anyway, Jack Berger. I consider not even talking about him because he's not that big of a deal, but he is one of the boyfriends that happens from season 5 to 6. And he's not great, but compare it to any of the other ones, this dude has no good qualities. At least Big is like tall and rich and everything. He don't have shit and he's terrible. He's still actively angry at his ex. They have bad sex. He sleeps with very loud frog noises, was intimidated by Carrie's career popping off, was rude to her friends, and broke up with her over a Post-it note. That was in 2 seasons, and he broke up with her over a Post-it note. You said a text is bad. Sent a Post-it note. Oh my God. And last but certainly least, in my opinion, the Russian. The Russian is the last boyfriend before she goes back to Big in season 6. And this is just boring. He's just boring. He's an artist. Honestly, the only reason he's in the show is because he lives in Paris and he wants Carrie to come out with him to Paris, and that's actually what she ends up doing. She gives away the city, you know, Sex in the City. Like, this is quite the act to leave Big. And so right before she leaves, this is of course when Big has to make his big, I haven't gotten over you. I want to be with you. Men do have a radar, don't they? Like when you're happy, they're like, can't have that. I wonder what she's up to. Hey, I've been thinking about you. Have you been watching the Paris Olympics? I'm particularly into the gymnastics because it got me thinking about how my heart still flips over you. You know, shit like that. I'm like, what the I remember the day I went on the first date with my current partner. I got a text from a guy that had ghosted me several weeks ago. And I was like, that's how I know this is a good sign. Let me go on this date. Because why do y'all always know? But anyway, yeah, he comes back with the bullshit like, no, don't go. Don't leave the city. Don't leave me. I love you, Carrie. Why did I make him French? And she's like, no, this, I'm going to France. And then she goes to Paris and she is very isolated for a while. And then she's like, I miss the big city. So she goes back and then she ends up with Big. But yeah, the Russian is not particularly consequential as a person himself. He's just like the guy that takes her to Paris so that her and Big can have this like big, I love you. Sure. They all have like a myriad of boyfriends that they've dated, but I'm just talking about like or people that they've dated, but I'm just talking about the important ones. There's Trey. Trey is Charlotte's first husband, and he is this very conventional, waspy, again, counterpart to Charlotte. He embodies all of her very traditional aspirations. He comes from like old money. They have this incredible apartment that's not even an apartment. Can you imagine how much that cost? Even back then in New York. They have some bedroom issues, and once they get that fixed, then they have fertility issues where she's not able to conceive with him. Also, she's not in great standings with his mother. So long story short, they end up getting divorced, and in the process of getting divorced, she ends up meeting her second husband, Harry, who was her divorce lawyer. And Harry is this kind of, he's bald, kind of doofy, kind of corny. He's nice. Of all the guys, I think he's probably the only one that I'm like, he's nice. A bit rough around the edges. The big like catalyst with him is that he's Jewish. And though he's in love with Carrie, he's like, I always promised my deceased mother that I would marry a Jewish woman. And Carrie, I'll become Jewish. Changing your entire belief system for a man is a choice, but okay. That's a lot of work for a man. Because she was like a Protestant. She's like an Episcopalian. So she had to change everything to marry this man. Though, again, he's a bit rough around the edges. He walks around butt naked and leaves dishes all over the house. He just like me for real. They end up having a very, very happy life with 2 children eventually. They have 1 kid that they adopt at the end of season 6, a little girl that they adopt from China. And then in one of the movies, she actually gets pregnant naturally. And that's very nice. That's very sweet. Granted, after the Man with 1,000 Kids, I have like very complicated feelings around international adoption and insemination. So watch my video on that if you haven't seen it already. Steve. Now, Steve is Miranda's in-game guy as well. He was this kind of nerdy, nice bumbling guy who was a bartender that she dated off and on throughout the show. They break up. They eventually reunite as friends. They sleep together again, get pregnant from that, co-parent while in separate relationships, then reunite, get married in a bit of an anticlimactic proposal and wedding, but it fits Miranda, who, again, the pragmatic one, the I don't want all the frills and all the romance one. And he's fine. He's chill and dopey. There's a particular issue with him in one of the movies, but at least in the show, he's sweet. Robert, again, not really that consequential, but he's Blair Underwood, baby. Ooh. 2004 Blair Underwood. Hell, Blair Underwood now. But 2004 Blair Underwood. Ooh, fine as hell. Oh my God. Ultimately, his entire job is just to bring Miranda and Steve back together. He's not in that many episodes, but oh my God, he's so fine. Jesus. Look at him. It's not the only person who has dated a black man in the show. Samantha dates one for an episode, but it's handled great, as you can imagine. So this is the only guy that's kind of handled semi-normally. Granted, she does seem to be watching a lot of interracial love stuff before she meets him. I don't know. But Blair Underwood, sexy. That's all I'm going to focus on. Hot as hell. Okay, Maria. So Maria is an ex of Samantha. Though she has like another relationship that's a few episodes long, the guy with the gherkin dick prior to this. Maria is her first, I think, proper relationship that spans over several episodes, and also is the only on-screen queer exploration of any of the main characters, right? This is a serious relationship. She is an artist that works at the art gallery that Charlotte runs. Charlotte runs an art gallery, even though she comes from money. It's like a hobby for her more so than anything. And they meet and they get along and obviously start a relationship. Again, it handles it better than like Friends did, as I mentioned, this kind of vague time period. It is referred to often as something that Samantha tried, quote unquote, as if Maria isn't a person. She isn't like one of her exes. She's that experience I did one time, and that's kind of interesting. The relationship is referred to periodically as the time Samantha was a lesbian. But hey, I'd imagine that eating coochie in a non-explicitly pornographic way in the 1990s was groundbreaking. So applaud there, I guess. But much in the same way that other like gay, lesbian people are kind of treated, like it's there, but in this kind of ornamentary way, if that makes sense. There's plenty of like gay guys in the margins and gay women in the margins. So this is definitely that time capsule of like, let's push the envelope a little bit and let gay people be seen. Not always explicitly just the butt of a joke, but oftentimes a lot. So again, revolutionary in some ways, not so revolutionary in other ways. Anyway, Richard, this sucked. I don't know why she liked this so much. He was her boss and he was a sexist piece of shit. And then she started liking him for some reason, I guess because he's a sexist piece of shit. And then she starts f***ing her boss, which is not a good idea. She falls in love with him. They enter into a serious relationship. She catches him giving head to a random woman in his hotel room, in his house, somewhere, giving head to another woman. And that breaks her heart. They eventually get back together, but she can't get over the fact that I caught you eating somebody else's coochie. He pops up periodically here and there, but he had no redeeming qualities. I don't know why the we even did that. And then last, but still least in my opinion, Smith. Smith is the last boyfriend that she has in the show. He's this significantly younger, I'd say probably late 20s, early 30s, Abercrombie hot guy, which, so hot that it's like I don't like it. Like if that me personally. Like I'm just sitting there like, oh, you look like you'd be playing volleyball in tighty whities on an Abercrombie and Fitch bag. Interesting. But they kind of hit it off because he was a waiter and she ends up him and he was very, very good at it. I will say he was doing some positions I ain't never seen before. There was one that looked like a scorpion and I was like, oh, if I weren't a virgin, I might have to try that. I was like, oh, that's a balancing act with the trapeze. They was moving furniture. They put a lazy boy on top of a mattress. I was like, y'all just getting creative. Like, what the I like it. But he's quite a bit younger than her. He's an AA, which isn't a big factor, but it's just something that is mentioned. There was a period where she nearly left him for Richard. as a avoidance tactic, like get away from me. But they end up getting back together, and in one of the later seasons she gets diagnosed with breast cancer, and he is kind of there to support her during that time, and they end up getting a lot closer through that. By the time we get to the movies, she's in remission, so he ends up being her rock in that way. As far as him as a character, again, they don't really flesh him out very well. He's very like Abercrombie. I mean this in the most respectful way possible. If you ever saw a model from an Abercrombie bag talking, it would freak you out, right? Like, they don't look like real people. So if you heard them say words, it would be like, huh? So that's kind of how I feel about it. It's like a talking Abercrombie bag. It's disconcerting. But anyway, he wants to be an actor. She is in PR, so they are starting their relationship, but she also starts to kind of propel his relationship forward. When we start getting into the movies, which I'm going to touch on in a bit, she has to come back and forth to continue the stories of our 4 favorite ladies. Do-do-do-do, do-do, do-do-do-do. Theme song is fire. I ain't gonna lie about that. My baby sleep. Aww. She's on antibiotics, so she'll start coughing up the phlegm. So don't be concerned. We've been doing that for days at this point. Just like sneezing. It's fine. I hope so. I'm here. Mama Hawk. So let's talk about the movies, right? In 2008, Sex and the City released a movie. And if it would have stayed with this movie, I think that this would have been a fine enough ending to the Sex and the City franchise. However, as we will find, there's a second one for some reason. I really wish they would have not done that. But the first movie, again, released in 2008, was so long, so much longer than necessary. It was 2.5 hours. Enough of that were photo shoots and montages. We could have trimmed the fat on that at least 15 minutes. We could have got it. I think we could have got it to 2 hours, but okay. But essentially, this is the continuation of the Big and Carrie story, because we're supposed to give a They have been dating for 2 years at this point, solidly. It's 2 years since the end of the show. And now, essentially, Carrie finds out about another woman who broke up with her boyfriend and was forced to move out of the house because she had no legal claim to the house because she was just a girlfriend. This kind of shakes Carrie when they move into their new big penthouse that he's paying for because he's the billionaire. And she's like, maybe we should get married out of just pragmatic legal security, essentially, for her. Like, she has no legal rights to the home they built together. And it's this very, like, I wouldn't mind marrying you type of energy from him. I think he says that pretty much verbatim. And I'm like, oh my God, how romantic. Oh, I've never felt more loved. So they get engaged and she has this big, like, rev up to it. She gets Vogue to take pictures of her in designer clothes, and it's going to be this big spreadsheet of this epic wedding. The woman who has been talking about romance in the city is now getting married to her billionaire prince or whatever, right? Meanwhile, Miranda and Steve are going through some issues because, again, they have a baby. The baby's getting older with work and their respective lives. They're growing apart. They're having sex a lot less. And eventually he ends up sleeping with another woman. This breaks them up for quite a bit. The vibe throughout the movie is essentially, he's a nice guy. Forgive him. But there's... I don't know. I feel like the nicest thing would be to have a conversation about how important sex is to you instead of cheating on me. But, okay. So her possibly going through a separation in the midst of Carrie getting married, she ends up saying to Big, who is already not particularly committed to the idea of getting married, he obviously seems a little thrown off by it anyway, is like, you guys would be crazy to get married to go through this shit. And so when the wedding comes by and he does not come, he stands Carrie up. Oh, how embarrassing. There's no way in hell. Miranda believes that it was her fault that he said no at the altar, which is not. He would have said no anyway, baby. I'm sorry. Like, don't put that on yourself. I will say, when Big stands her up, what a scene. It was so cathartic. She threw the roses at him like, you've humiliated me.
I knew you would do this. I knew it.
Carrie, I'm sorry.
I am humiliated.
And I'm like, yes, baby. He's been humiliating you for like 8 years now. I knew you would do this. I knew you would do this. No. Love it. But basically, the movie is just like a bunch of montages and arguments, some between the girls, some between them and their husbands. But it all culminates in this big flourish where Big regrets embarrassing her in front of Vogue. Bitch. She didn't pay her rent by buying shoes. And you want to embarrass her on her wedding night in front of Vogue? Oh my God, I'd have to kill you. But okay, he's like, I regret it. So he starts sending her clips of other people's poems to her email. And she's like, oh my God, he's so romantic. I can't believe I'm about to forgive him again. Also, meanwhile, Charlotte gets pregnant naturally. And because Big runs into her when her water breaks, Carrie forgives him because he helped her when she needed to deliver a baby. Okay. In a move that I guess is supposed to be romantic, instead of having a big wedding, they get back together and get married in a courthouse. I would kill him. You embarrassed my giant, beautiful, expensive Vogue shoot wedding. And now you want to come back to me and somehow turn a courthouse marriage into a romantic gesture because all I want is you. I don't even want all that shit. All I want is to get married. Gah. You embarrassed me in public. You're going to marry me in public. You embarrassed me in Vogue. We're going to do double, bitch. Why am I about to cry? It's not about the wedding. It's about you embarrassing me. How the I mean, like, this is my third wedding. Bitch, it's my first. And you fucked up my first one. I would kill him. But I wouldn't be back together with him. Oh my God. Oh, also Smith and Samantha break up. It's amicable. Essentially, she had wrapped her life around him being his manager. And she's like, that's not who I am. I got to move back to New York and, you know, be me, be free. But yeah, she's like, I'm more of a New York type of girl. So she moves back to New York. Oh, and also Miranda and Steve make up. Again, I don't like Steve in this. He sucks. And I know it's supposed to be like, well, it's people working through their hardships. They go to therapy in the process of working out their relationship. And he says something. Oh, I can't remember the exact words, but I remember looking at it like, this sucks. They go to therapy. She talks about how she's like, he's made it hard for me to trust him, which makes sense because he cheated on her. And he's like, what about how I can't trust you anymore? And she's like, what? He was like, the way that you treated me, the way that you threw me out after I cheated on you. I don't know. How do I know you're not going to do that to me again?
Miranda, I know I made it hard for you to trust me, but you made it hard for me to trust you.
Me?
The way you treated me and cut me out of your life like that, I mean, yeah, I broke a vow. What about the other vows? Promising to love someone for better or for worse. What about that?
Are crazy. They're unwell. But yeah, eventually they get back together, meeting each other on the Brooklyn Bridge and yada, 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 whatever. Yeah, movie 2. Don't watch this movie. They really could have stopped the first one. So the second movie that we should all just accumulatively act like didn't exist, but I have to talk about it because what the was that? I watched it last night. For some reason, takes place in Abu Dhabi, where the girls go to the Middle East in 2010. Just do a bunch of racist shit, a bunch of Islamophobic shit, a bunch of like fake feminism shit, and also have Liza Minnelli dancing and singing to single ladies. Don't know why. I'm crying a little bit. I have a little It's so bad. Basically, the gist of it is the girls are all married except for Samantha, who doesn't like aspire to marriage. So we're all in the places we're supposed to be. The only thing with her is that she's menopausal and struggling with hot flashes and like a wavering sex drive. But Carrie and Big have been married for a few years now and things are settled and boring. And she's like, why does he just want to sit on the couch and watch old movies the way we were? The one where she like shows her leg to the cab driver in the 1930s. Well, that was a big deal. And they reference later where Carrie's wearing a burqa in Abu Dhabi. I'll get to it. And she shows her leg to hail a cab. But anyway, her and Big have reached another lull in their relationship. And then she hears him say that he wants to have an apartment that he can stay in for 2 days out of the week, where she can have her shit she needs to do and he can have his shit he needs to do, which honestly doesn't sound like a bad idea to me. If y'all had a more secure relationship, I think that would be fire. Like, have your own place that you have independent of your partner, and then you come back together and leave for 2 days and come back together. That sounds fire. They don't have no kids, so it's not like they need to work together in that way. I like the idea. Also, their choice to not have kids is also something that's brought up, you know, relatively well-ish, where people are kind of look at you like you have a fourth eye because you decided you're a woman who doesn't want to have kids. I say all this to say they end up in Abu Dhabi because Samantha goes on a PR trip and brings them all along, and they go to this like giant palace type place where they have servants. And we, as the audience, are forced to watch the white women in the Middle East who are trying to bring feminism to the Middle East for 2.5 hours.
How's she gonna do that? A lift for every fry.
Oh my God, it's painful. It's so bad. It's so bad and unnecessary because it doesn't really propel any real story forward for the characters. Carrie ends up running into Aiden in this for some reason. There's 12 people in the world, it seems, because what the is he doing in Abu Dhabi? But anyway, they run into each other, catch up. He's married and now has 3 kids, and they kiss. And she runs away from him, and then she tells Big, and ultimately he forgives her. So, and then they end up getting kicked out of the expensive hotel they were at because Samantha was making out with a man on the beach. They get deported. Samantha also makes a very ruckus "I have sex" thing when some condoms fall out of her bag in the middle of a marketplace. And then they're saved by mysterious women in burqas who really like Vogue. So they take off their burqas and hijabs and show that they really like Chanel, and then give them the burqas so that they can escape to the airport. And then this is awful. It's awful. It's really bad. And they show Leg to escape into the taxi and go back to New York, the safe and wonderful world that they've always known. And when Carrie gets back, her and Big make up, live happily ever after, I guess. Yeah, I watched that. And that's kind of the end of their story. Except I did see a spoiler somewhere that apparently in the reboot, Big dies. So they lived happily ever after as long as he lived. Speaking of the reboot, I didn't watch it, but I do want to touch on it a little bit because I did see some shit that I thought was interesting. It's called And Just Like That, which is a series that has had 2 seasons, I believe. I don't know if they're trying to come back for a 3rd one. I, again, didn't watch it, so I don't know how it kind of ended. But essentially, there was a rumored for a 3rd film. You don't need to do it. If that was your 2nd, it's okay to stop it. But there was a rumor for a 3rd film that would eventually be approved and then canceled. But eventually, they decided to take a lot of those key points from that movie and make it into a 2021 reboot of sorts called And Just Like That. This would be following all the girls, sans Samantha, who did not want to return to the show. Kim Cattrall, the actress, refused to return to the show. And that's for a number of reasons that have been rumored. Some about like pay. She is said to have disliked the script for the 3rd one. She also was just like, I'm done. I thought we finished the story. I thought we were done with these characters. I thought we closed it with a beautiful bow on the first movie. Why are we still here? And then, of course, there's her rumored feud of sorts with Carrie actress Sarah Jessica Parker.
I just wish that Sarah had been nicer.
And she did a bit of a press run throughout the years, kind of talking about why she was not interested in returning to a reboot. But she does pop into the last episode of the reboot as a cameo. And maybe that is supposed to be the final like bow on the Sex and the City universe. There was also a prequel about Carrie that was on the CW, I think. But I don't know shit about that. I think it did 2 seasons, but I'm not interested in looking into that. I will say I love Kim Cattrall. She's actually very funny, at least in this context of like things she said about the series. She was like, she's the source of the meme of sorts of, I don't want to be in a situation for even an hour where I'm not enjoying myself. Real ass bitch. I was past the finish line playing Samantha Jones because I loved Sex and the City. It was a blessing in so many ways, but after the 2nd movie, I'd had enough. I couldn't understand why they wouldn't just replace me with another actress instead of wasting time bullying. No means no. But yeah, That's my romp down the stories of Sex in the City. It was incredibly engrossing, incredibly frustrating and annoying, but also good trash television. And in many ways subversive and before its time, and in many ways very much so a product of its time. Ma'am, you're showing your whole ass. Though it was a waste of time in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't a waste of my time. Some of it was actually very funny. The gherkin thing lives in my brain rent free. And it was fun. It was nice to have it on in the background. This kind of mindless, but also like somewhat relatable story. But also, of course, it just fell apart with that second movie. They really didn't have to do that second movie. Like before that, they were definitely fumbling bags around race, gender, sex, relationships, internalized misogyny. Like Samantha's character has a tendency to like excuse a lot of, actually everybody but Miranda is very prone to like excusing bad male behavior away. But you know, in many ways, a show before its time, a show ahead of its time, a show of its time at its worst. But I watched it, and maybe you will too. Don't watch the second movie. I'm so serious. It's not worth that 2.5 hours. I'm so sorry I even let you know about it, but you got the gist of it. It's bad. But yeah. Did you grow up with Sex and the City? Have you watched it recently? It does seem like a lot of people are watching it all of a sudden, all at the same time. So let me know what you think about it, what your history is with it. Do you plan to watch it after this video? I don't think I sold it great, but it is very funny. I wouldn't say that. There are scenes, it's very campy, not campy. It's very like corny and funny and quippy. And at least those first few seasons are a fun watch. It gets a little exhausting as we keep going through it. I'm like, okay, we get it. The same shit. All right. Damn. Ain't none of you bitches ever happy. But anyway, if you like this video, feel free to like this video. Follow me on all my social media, Instagram and Twitter, both of which are KennieJD. And I will see you guys next time. Bye. Do 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 do